This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den.
And welcome into the Huskies Warming House Podcast, episode number 143. Happy New Year to all of us. Joining us, in fact, I even wrote my year wrong in my notes I'm just looking at, Nick. It is January 1st of 2023. Let's not go back a year because 2022 was,
It was interesting.
But nonetheless, we're back here in the new year. We have a new look for those looking on the YouTube feed. I am still in game mode from
You are
last.
still in Minotauro mode, yes.
I am still in Minotaur mode. 3 games in 3 days was
You
a
can
pretty
let go of the horns now, Noah.
Yeah. It was pretty fun, though. I mean, 2 1-goal hockey games, and then the third one, last night the Toros score to take the lead with 20 seconds and an empty netter. So theoretically 3 1-goal hockey games. I mean, you can't get any better than that moving into the new year. They do have another 3-game set against St. Cloud this upcoming weekend. So I am definitely still in Toro mode, which is funny because when I was describing the Toro plays to Nick before the show, I kept saying St. Cloud. So I don't know. It might be a mess. But nonetheless, if you're joining us on any video virtual streaming platform, we look different and we've got new graphics going on. So we would love for you to check that out. And of course, Nick Maxon's beautiful face as always as well. Find him on Twitter at Nick Maxon.
That's a fallacy.
PXB. But anyway, starting off the new year, we have a lot to talk about, a fair amount of things to recap in the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup, although less than I kind of anticipated. But we'll get there. We'll have our hands full with college hockey. Again, the non-conference schedule, holiday schedule is still kind of coming to an end. A lot going on this week and next week. As we preview, we still have some kind of jumbling going on. So we'll kind of reset and try to bring you through all of that. A lot of hockey to recap and some very interesting scores as always. The men did play their exhibition game against Manitoba, so we'll take a look at that. Women's hockey was off, but we'll preview what they have coming up. They'll be in the Minneapolis area this upcoming weekend. Minnesota Wild news, they're 8-2 in their last 10. We'll talk about them. And then the extra ice session, what else but the World Junior Championship, of course. The seedings are ready for the medal round, and we get underway tomorrow on January 2nd, and we can't wait. So we start, as always, with the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup and Center Ice View News and Notes.
Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
Center Ice View News and Notes, Noah. And, before we get to the notes, Noah, we're forgetting something. And I say this and I wonder if you'll get this. This is sort of the pseudo 3-year anniversary of the Huskies Warming House podcast, if you recall. It was the taped episode and the tweets that
at first I was like,
you're it on air, right?
At first I was like, you're a month early, but then I was like, oh, you're right.
I think we have, let's just say we have saved that for the vault for a specific purpose, we'll eventually get that back, but kind of weird that, thinking just about 3 years ago, this thing was sort of, not just a tear in eye, it was actually rolling down the cheek. It was, starting to begin its journey before we really kicked things off. So kind of weird that it's been that long.
It's, it's interesting too, because you think about it, that was January of 2020, and we really had no idea, not only for our show, but as a society had no idea what was about to be in store for us. So it's funny. I remember still doing the last game on the whatever it was, the 4th and 5th or 5th and 6th of March. And then a couple days later, we were in Duluth at a bar and then watching the Minnesota high school state tournament like nothing was wrong. And then a week later, we were back at home on lockdown for almost a month. So it has been definitely interesting. I'm glad we're not locked down and playing a lot of hockey now. But yeah, you are right. It's not
crazy.
A lot of things going on here in 2023. And dare I say this might be the most exciting year for St. Cloud hockey that we've had in all 3 years, depending on how the men shape up for their potential. And of course, the women's bringing things around too. And not to mention other news around the hockey world as well.
So let's get into it, right? No, I have to rate a sentimental moment. The Maple Leafs have been fined a couple of times, $100,000 for the team for violating a rule prohibiting team activities over the holiday break. Let's be specific because I know all of our fans want the exact, CBA or whatever it is. So Article 16.5 in parentheses B. So I guess there's a subsection there. The CBA states December 24th, 5th, and 26th are days off for, quote, all purposes, including travel. So what this means, that means you can't do a darn thing in those 3 days, right? So the Leafs were supposed to fly to St. Louis just after midnight Eastern on Tuesday the 27th, which would have been in compliance with this rule. But instead, they departed shortly before 10:30 p.m. on the 26th. For those playing the home game, 26th was mentioned as a day of no travel. So this is why this is happening. The team's rationale, however, was like, hey, St. Louis is at least a 90-minute flight. I'd prefer to leave at night and arrive then as the players are used to, as opposed to departing 5 a.m. on the 27th. So I get it. I get it's an easier maybe on the players' bodies. You're trying to get back in the game sort of mode per se, but you can't do that, right? Yeah. Additionally, head coach Sheldon Keefe was fined $25,000 for deeming conduct directed at officials during Tuesday night's win over the St. Louis Blues. So apparently this trip to St. Louis had just a negative vibe for the Maple Leafs. Kind of I don't think I've ever read a team violating the travel rule before. That's new. But certainly, we've seen plenty of head coaches being docked a few $1,000s for, shall we say, some choice words.
Yeah, that's chump change, so to speak, if you're a head coach in the National Hockey League. But nonetheless, it is a fine. But yeah, the travel thing's a little bit weird. I wonder if there's something that you could stipulate where it's like you can make a travel request to the league, or if it's just like set in stone, like you can't do it. We're not even going to have this discussion type thing.
Pretty sure, yeah.
Which makes sense, but at the same time, I mean, things happen. Like for example, in the Maple Leafs, we're kind of doing it just to their own advantage, which you can't do that. Nope. But I think about, what if Buffalo was playing in St. Louis? Don't forget that huge holiday storm that actually disrupted some college hockey out there in Western New York, Eastern New York as well. So, you think about the Sabres. What if they had to leave a day early to get ahead of weather? Quite simply as well too. So you wonder if there is some play with that, but if you're a Maple Leafs fan, nope.
I would think in that particular situation, if the league is looking at it, I would be curious if they would lean towards a travel differential, or would they lean towards, say, a postponement? It sort of sounds like they're actually.
Oddly enough, there was a game that was actually postponed. I believe it was Buffalo and Tampa Bay, if I'm not mistaken. So
if that gives you any precedence.
Moot point, I guess.
Yeah. So it is interesting though, right? To think it does sound like that's sort of a very closed end deal there, and I get it because we know how difficult and strenuous the NHL season is. So it's more of like that, trying to make sure that players get that mandatory. Because you think about it's not just that you hop on a plane magically, right? You have to leave your family earlier. You got to, pack. You got to get to the airport, meet with the team. That's hours beforehand. So you really are losing half of the day. So I know that I think that's really what the league is trying to avoid. But nonetheless, what was not avoided was Roman Josi becoming the Predators' all-time points leader for the Nashville Predators over the holiday weeks. After he got an assist on Tommy Novak's goal against the Blackhawks. This is kind of cool, Noah, because he passes Nashville legend David Lagwan with 565 points. So this assist gives him 566. He also joins quite an elite group as far as defensemen is concerned. He just passed also Ray Bourque as the second defenseman in NHL history to lead an active franchise in points.
Joins him. He's only the second defenseman to ever lead an active franchise in points as a D-man.
Anyway.
You said he passed him. It's hard to pass a guy who doesn't play for your own team, but nonetheless.
One quick sip of coffee here. Hold on.
Yeah, he's very good. 96 points last season for him, the most by a defenseman since Phil Housley back in 92-93. And last time I checked, he had a pretty decent career. Actually played hockey with my dad in high school a little bit, which is wild. And also
St. Paul, right?
Yeah, interesting story too. Of course, my mom went to school in South St. Paul as well. When they were about 5th or 6th graders, they were actually on the outdoor rink watching, the boys skate or whatever over Christmas time, and they were standing kind of adjacent to the net. And my mom and her sister were there, and Phil Housley actually took a shot that caromed off of something and hit my mom's sister right between the eyes and broke her glasses right in half. And I was like, you didn't get your glasses signed then, even though he was like a 6th grader? Like, come on, that should have been, an absolute
your
given.
sign moment, right?
Yeah, but certainly has looked good for him, in his career as a defenseman. And also, how about another forward by the name of Sidney Crosby and his honors too as well? It's been pretty impressive.
Sidney Crosby, yeah. So how best to say this, right? He's been given a governmental shall we say, accolade that it would be equivalent to the Presidential Medal of Freedom down here in the U.S.
Yeah, it's kind of also kind of like being knighted over in Europe.
Pretty much. Yeah. So for those playing the home game, this is the Order of Canada is what they're referring to. He's one of 32 new officers and 99 new appointments to the order. Now, how do you get this, right? So, okay, he's a great hockey player, but that probably wouldn't be enough. A lot of it comes from his charity work. Has done quite a bit. So, for example, he donated 100,000 meals to Greater Pittsburgh Food Bank in 2020, and also partnered with hockey equipment manufacturer CCM to donate 87 sets of full hockey equipment to underrepresented Nova Scotia communities in 2019. So, that's insane.
And that's just in the past couple of years. It doesn't even denote what he's done in the previous decade. So
right. And I know that, shall we say, others maybe we've heard more, like I know PK Subban, his work with the Montreal Children's Hospital, just to name a couple. And, it's good to see that, these athletes who we all know who they are on the ice. Oftentimes we don't give them enough accolades for stuff they do off the ice. I'm glad that not just the public, but the government of Canada is actually recognizing, actually giving them some really, nice due diligence, shall we say, mentions for that. So that's definitely well earned.
Yeah, certainly is. No surprise. You look at some of the players and people that have gone through that process. It's a very elite status. You think about it and you hear 32 new officers. Well, it takes a lot to kind of even be in the conversation. Think about Sidney Crosby, even just his on-ice stuff, 3 Stanley Cups, Olympic gold medalist, pretty much has won at every level.
World Junior, yep.
Yeah, one of the best Canadian players of all time, especially on the men's side. I think the comparable on the women's side, Haley Wickenheiser, for example, who not sure if she's part of the order or not, but I wouldn't be shocked. And it's a fantastic honor for him, and excited to see how he finishes out his career. Both of the boys, man, they're getting a little bit older here, him and Ovi, although they don't seem to be slowing down at all.
No, not at all. Speaking of not slowing down, Noah, let's quickly wrap up my portion of this. The Carolina Hurricanes are they're not a wagon, they're a freaking freight train right now. There's no stopping this train. They just broke their franchise record for their 10th straight win as they beat the Florida Panthers 4-0 on Friday. First time that Florida was shut out all season, which is a little surprising, who have not been a wagon as of late. They've lost 4 or 5. Certainly they've been hampered by some significant injuries too on the Florida Panthers front. So that has not helped their case. But on the flip side, the Hurricanes have registered a league high 5 shutouts. So holy buckets. We knew Carolina has been good. I mean, in fact, the last couple of regular seasons, Noah, this team has been very, very good. They're certainly looking like a playoff team as they have been the last few seasons. But I think that for the fan base and, 6-7 years ago, were we having the same conversation? Was this team going to get moved? I mean, they were pretty bad. I mean, now it's how far can they go in the playoffs? And certainly the regular season, I don't think is going to be sort of their measuring stick. It's going to be how far they go in the postseason, because this team is very, very good.
Certainly would agree. It's kind of weird that it's the first time they've gotten to 10 in a row, though. You think about the previous history of this franchise, and they've been on a tear. Of course, 2006 was a special team for obvious reasons, but interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on the Hurricanes as they do battle in the Eastern Conference. Another team in the East as we get to a trade, a couple of signings, a retirement, and some injuries here. The trade Dennis Mulligan to the Avs for Dryden Hunt. The Leafs sent forward for a forward. Mulligan is 25, 2 goals, 2 assists in 23 contests this season with Toronto, and Dryden Hunt, 27 years of age, 2 goals in 28 games this campaign with the Avs and New York Rangers in a fourth line role. Mulligan is probably the better offensive player, but you look at Dryden Hunt, his defensive metrics are extremely, extremely strong in a 1-to-1 comparison in his 193 NHL game career. So
Toronto is missing defensive players? No way.
Who would have thunk? I think they do pretty well on the offensive side of the puck. So
this is actually a really good trade for Toronto. Very good trade.
Yeah, not really sure. This Colorado team with injuries that we'll kind of get to as well too. They're clinging on to fourth in the Central, essentially in that wild card spot area. But it's been a weird ride for them. Edmonton Oilers signing here: Stuart Skinner, netminder, a 3-year extension, 2.6 average annual value.
That's
much better.
Fantastic signing, actually.
Much better than their last goaltender that they signed to a lengthy. And then on the other side of Canada, Ottawa Senators signing defenseman Artem Zub to a 4-year extension, 4.6 average annual value. No surprise there. Obviously a pretty good defenseman over there in Ottawa, in Canada, Ontario.
Canada, yes. Can we pause for a quick second? Because what I want to do is that Maple Leafs Stuart Skinner signing is actually low-key very sneaky.
Oilers.
Why do we say that? So let's just, Oilers. My brain is not on today. It's just not good.
You also want to work for the Toros again. We get it.
I know. So, is there a pretty big, off season coming up here for the Oilers? It kind of is.
Are they getting the first round pick again?
You know what? Here's my qualm with the Oilers. Right, you take away Connor McDavid, you take away Leon Draisaitl, and as far as maybe Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who else on that team up front really, is really that productive?
Zach Hyman, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Other than that, I'm not particularly sure. Maybe Kaylor Yamamoto. At times. Jesse Puljujarvi has the potential, but has certainly struggled mightily this season. But other than that, nobody really.
No. And why that's
Evander Kane, I guess, considering he's hurt. But
right. Yeah. When Evander Kane does come back, it's a completely different team. But here's where I was going with this: is there's a lot of people looking at the Edmonton franchise and going, geez, they just can't get it together. Connor McDavid's going to want out. Now, mind you, there's McDavid it doesn't matter. I don't think he's going anywhere.
Agreed.
It's especially when he's got 3 more years left after this year in his deal. He's going to get handsomely paid before then. In fact, I think he'll sign a contract the year prior to that. And I think he's going to, equal north of $15 million. That's just my gut. But Noah, if you're Edmonton, are you sort of try to maybe project 3 years out for your salary cap, knowing that McDavid's going to probably want that money north of $15 million? He's going to deserve every freaking penny of it. Because let's just say the Edmonton Oilers don't, consistently make the playoffs, or they maybe fall short in the first round. You're going to have to make quite a significant offer to keep him around. Or if you're McDavid, do you leverage that and try to see if you can't go somewhere else?
Yeah, and you also obviously have the salary cap, which is supposed to hopefully increase quite a bit in the next 2 years, maybe 3. So maybe they're anticipating that as well, too. Like you mentioned, I don't think McDavid's going anywhere, and Edmonton's going to do everything they can to keep him there. But it is a low-risk, high-reward signing for a netminder. You think about Koskinen. It was a big overpay, $4.5 million per season, and it didn't really pan out over 4 years for him. I mean, he wasn't terrible, but it just was not the best fit, and a little bit kind of pulling the trigger too early. A much better signing for Stuart Skinner here, and a low risk, high reward. So I think if anything, you give yourself more flexibility to not have to worry about the goaltending position if he continues to play the right way. And like you said, lets you kind of reset and figure out other things. Evander Kane notwithstanding as well too. So a lot of stuff going on for that Oilers club that not particularly sure. Other than that, though, Nick, sticking over with Canada and the Senators again, former Senators netminder Andrew Hammond, the Hamburglar, retires after 10 years, 31, 20, and 7 with a 9.16 in 67 NHL games over his career. He is 34 years of age, and you have.
If that doesn't tell you what you think of me, I don't know what does.
Wow. But beyond that, last played for Montreal and kind of tweaked his ankle, tried to play a couple games in the K and really said that ankle injury was a little bit too much to be worth it. So you wish him the best of luck. Of course, spent a fair amount of time in Iowa with the Minnesota Wild and that franchise as well, too. So kind of interesting, very much a suitcase journeyman netminder in his career, but he made a decade of living.
He did.
Playing hockey in the NHL and AHL, so you wish him the best of luck in whatever he does next. Final topic here, injuries here. We've got a handful. Flyers, Cam Atkinson, before it even started, his season is definitely done. Undergoing neck surgery, definitively will not play this season. Also with the Flyers, Carter Hart, netminder, is day-to-day with an upper body injury as well. St. Louis, Torrey Krug out at least 6 weeks due to injury as well. I believe it's an upper body injury, but I could be wrong. Washington Capitals defenseman John Carlson out indefinitely after taking that slap shot to the head. That was a messy one. We talked about the Avs as well too. Valery Nichushkin re-injuring the surgically repaired ankle that he just had done. There's no timetable for his return. He basically missed all of October and November and came back and tweaked it right away. So you hope that he is going to be okay. And his former team, the Dallas Stars, forward Denis Gurianov, indefinite leave of absence for an unspecified family reason. And welcome into the main portion of the show, the Huskies Warming House podcast. New look, new year here for us. Episode number 143. We are
Same
recording.
faces, by the way. That's unfortunate.
Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not particularly sure. But nonetheless, we do have hockey going around whatever time of year. And of course, our St. Cloud State Huskies men's team did play. Before we get to that, however, we are probably going to record on Monday night of next week just because St. Cloud, their men's game is Saturday, Sunday. So we want to make sure we can recap both of those contests. The game is at 6 o'clock on Saturday and 3 o'clock on Sunday. First one at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center and then down at 3M Arena in Mariucci. It's been a while since St. Cloud has played a true afternoon game on the road. I suppose maybe last year against St. Thomas at the XL probably would have been the last one. Of course, national tournament notwithstanding. But as far as actual scheduling, we'll talk about scheduling in the Golden Gophers in just a little bit here too, because there seems to be some uproar about that. But nonetheless, before we get to everything else, Nick, very quickly, happy holidays, happy New Year. Did you do anything exciting for the Christmas and New Year's break? Of course, we were off for 2 weeks, so.
Not really. Calling some games in North Iowa again, continuing that train. But
Boo.
Really, I know, right?
For those who don't know, North Iowa and Minot are separated by just a couple of points.
2 points right
2
now.
points, yeah. So,
and 2 games in hand, if I recall, for North Iowa. So
shut up.
Well, there's plenty of head-to-head matchups coming up here.
Yeah, in fact, we were just in Bismarck last night. That is the next home opponent for the Bobcats, actually, is North Iowa. You'll be headed there. So,
2 weeks for that. That bus ride is going to be rough, to say it lightly.
Well, come on. America's Wasteland, it's cool. You'll drive and you'll see flat land, and then you'll drive another hour and it'll be flat still. So that's cool.
I hear the prairie grass changes maybe slightly.
Yeah, occasionally. Sometimes you'll get a snowdrift if you're lucky, but you'll get a windmill occasionally. I mean,
trees.
Yeah.
You have those?
Handful of them. If you're lucky, you'll see a cow or two. I mean, like, you got a lot to look forward to, man. Do not sleep on that bus ride.
I'll bring the camera. So, but not really. Just kind of hanging out. Work has also been incredibly busy. The 9 to 5 gig, so it's been a lot of work again year end for those for financial implications is that everybody trying to jam pack some things in before the end of the fiscal year. So that's been quite crazy busy as to be expected. And then gearing up, which is could be quite the 2023 for myself. It's looking like it's hopefully some big changes. Hopefully the chase that has essentially begun since last April/May might be finally hopefully coming to a decisive end, but we'll see.
Yeah, definitely have to take a look. I didn't really do a whole lot either. Just went and saw some family. Of course, girlfriend is in town as well, too, from Anchorage, Alaska. We'll talk about those darn Seawolves this week. They made their 4,555-mile trip matter for sure.
Yes,
very interesting fashion. Can't wait to get to that series as always. Let's start with some college hockey news here. A couple of conference games here. Only, I was going to say 2 matchups as of note, but one of them was actually closed. So let's start with the one that did happen. Mercyhurst traveled to Sacred Heart Thursday, Friday. Sacred Heart, a 4-3 OT win and a 4-1 finish for them. Keep an eye on them. They've actually climbed the standings in Atlantic hockey, so they might be a force to be reckoned with as we enter tournament time. Canisius was supposed to be traveling to Air Force, but that was postponed due to weather-related closure of the Buffalo, New York airports this week, preventing that travel to Colorado. These games will be made up before the end of the season, so it's supposed to be a weekend matchup. That did not happen. As far as tournaments going on here this past week, we kind of grouped those accordingly. The Great Lakes Invitational, Nick, it didn't list it on any of the things, but they did actually play twice, which they should have.
Yep.
Tuesday, December 27th, Michigan Tech played Western Michigan. Western Michigan, an 8-1 victory. This was a little surprising to me. I get that the Broncos are good, but this Tech team is not a bad group this year. And even more surprising, Ferris State beating Michigan State on the other side by a score of 4-2. So things got real interesting real quick.
And for those playing the home game, some of the Minnesota matchups that we saw were exhibition. These were not exhibition games. These had pairwise implications as well.
Yeah, of course, you mentioned the exhibition ones. That Gopher matchup against Bemidji was an exhibition game yesterday, which didn't help or hurt anything, but Huskies fans were watching that one intently, surely. So the Michigan State Spartans got the Michigan Tech Huskies, and it was Tech 3-2 in overtime. So this tournament actually providing a lot of intrigue, which, considering last year's tournament, or lack thereof, that's a bold statement. And then Ferris State trounced by Western 8-2. So Western Michigan outscoring their opponents 16-3 over the weekend.
They're
wow.
Good.
Not too shabby. Holiday face-off Wednesday, December 28th and Thursday, December 29th. Lake Superior State was bested by Wisconsin 4-0, and Clarkson beat UMass by a score of 6-3. That Clarkson-UMass matchup was an intriguing one. And then UMass did beat Lake Superior 4-1. There, no surprise that the Lakers outscored 8-1 on the weekend. And then Wisconsin losing to Clarkson 3-1. So really scores that we, I suppose, anticipated. In that one a little bit more. And then the Ledyard Bank Classic, December 30th and 31st, pretty much a normal weekend set, just a holiday tournament. Providence beating Yale 3-0, and Merrimack, a real scare from Dartmouth 3-2. They had to beat them in overtime. That would have been a devastating loss for Merrimack. They did lose to Providence the next night 6-1, so they'll drop a couple of spots, but that Providence team is not too shabby, I don't think so. And then Dartmouth did beat Yale last night 4-3. So kind of an interesting little set there. The U.S. Under-18 team traveling, they played Minnesota first. They beat they lost to the Gophers, 3-2, and then they had North Dakota yesterday and lost 4-3 to North Dakota. So a couple of really close games for the under-18 team. The Gophers, of course, played Bemidji State, like we mentioned, on Saturday, and they did win 2-1 in that exhibition contest, which why it's an exhibition contest, I don't
no idea.
Not particularly sure. Other than that, a couple Thursday, Friday matchups. RPI got swept by Bowling Green. Cornell beat AIC 8-4, and then a 3-3 overtime finish yesterday. UConn home and home against Long Island University. They got a big scare in the first night, winning 2-1 in overtime. That could have been a devastating loss for that group. They won 5-3 in the second night. So again, still difficult to get a real read on Hockey East because everything has kind of gone crazy. But nonetheless, New Hampshire was swept by Union this week. Penn State handily handled RIT, outscoring them 9-2 on the weekend. And then our favorite, Nick, Alaska Anchorage, UMass Lowell, the first game, a 4-2 victory with an empty netter in that one, outshot 54-12.
Yeah.
in the first matchup and winning the game, and then outshot 28-20 in night number 2 and winning 3-2. What a showing for the Seawolves in that road trip. Dare we say, because we don't talk about this often because it doesn't really happen, I suppose maybe we need to start scheduling some more East Coast games for the Seawolves, because apparently whatever's over on the other side, Pacific versus Atlantic, it's certainly working.
Well, and it used to be that way, right? Pre-pandemic. Apologies for the sniffles for the folks listening.
Nick's getting all choked up about this big Seawolves sweep. Only their third and fourth victory of the season. There are only other two coming against Northern Michigan and Western Michigan, 2 games that both had a similar vein as Friday night's finish.
Yeah, and for UMass Lowell, I think if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong, that may have dropped them 10 spots in the pairwise. It was a pretty significant drop. So Alaska Anchorage, and this is the beauty of college hockey right now, and that is you cannot ever count any opponent out. I
was gonna say, Huskies fans thought Miami was bad,
right? And this is the intrigue, right? Whereas if there's any sort of somewhat clarity that we've kind of got over this holiday, and we have more scores to cover, of course, is it seems like that if there ever was a discussion of which side of the country is better, it certainly seems like the west side of college hockey is certainly seemingly stronger, at least based on some very little matchups that we've had so far.
And because we're over here, right? So
I guess, yeah. No bias here at all.
How about some East-West matchup here? Boston College traveling down to Arizona State. It was BC, a 5-2 victory in the first night, and Arizona State 2-1 victory for the split in night number 2. A good little matchup there. Friday night only game, Harvard traveling to Boston University. Overtime finish, 2-1. The Terriers getting the victory in that one. Maine was swept by Colgate. While they lost the first night to Colgate, and then a 1-1 tie in night number 2. A little bit surprised there, but both those teams are kind of this same mold, different vein kind of thing. Yep. Friday night only matchup for Quinnipiac versus Holy Cross, and Northeastern against Bentley. Quinnipiac beating Holy Cross, and Bentley, a former Toro, a 3-1 victory over Northeastern, backstopping his team to another victory. Did the same thing against Ohio State. This Bentley club has disrupted a couple of games this season, including Northeastern, who could have really used that one. Lindenwood traveling to Vermont. It was a split. The Catamounts winning 4-2 in night number 1 before the Lindenwood Lions, a 3-2 overtime victory for them. And then Alaska, Fairbanks, and Notre Dame Saturday, Sunday. We just have last night's score for you, a 3-2 victory for Fairbanks, throwing even more intrigue into this one. So, Nick, holiday season never fails to excite, but especially this year, the trend continues, and how exciting over all these non-conference games spread out all over the country.
Very much so. And you know what? Maybe we haven't talked about this enough, Noah, but because Husky fans are so quick on the trigger, right? With anything, in terms of negativity happens, when you're sitting now 5th in the pairwise, just based on some of the results that have happened over the holidays, and with some of the murky waters that are really past what maybe position 12, right? Honestly, you have to feel pretty good about where you're sitting. You're not, in a position where the waters are very mucky. You're kind of clearly in a different echelon of teams. And if you're watching all these different results with, Northeastern and Bentley, mind you, Bentley 58th in the pairwise. If you're Northeastern now, if you had a sniffing chance, and now you dropped to 38. My gosh. Whoops. Yeah. Whoops. So, and obviously we have some St. Cloud stuff to talk to, but, again, because I think we have to provide a little context on the show at times is, they were 7th going into the holiday break. They haven't played essentially a meaningful game. Yes, we'll talk about their exhibition game in a minute, but just looking at all these middle of the pack teams, there's quite a bit of them. And it's good that you're not in the mix of that, lost in, shall we say, the brownie batter. It's really just one big cluster F of teams.
Yeah. Now I want brownies. But anyway, with that being said, why don't we cook up what's on tap here for the upcoming week here? Some non-conference holiday action yet to be played. We'll get to that first. We have one tournament going on, couple of conference games for each conference, and then another matchup as well, too. So Alaska and Notre Dame will play their Sunday set today. Northeastern travels to Harvard today. Army plays Yale tomorrow on Monday. Brown plays UMass in a single game set on Tuesday, and St. Lawrence and Niagara Thursday, Saturday matchup. That's relevant because St. Lawrence played Colorado College earlier this season, and of course the Niagara-Miami series of last weekend, offering some intrigue as well too. As far as the tournament yet to be played, Desert Hockey Classic at Mullet Arena down at ASU, 6th and 7th. BU will play Air Force, and Michigan Tech will play Arizona State. Tech involved in back-to-back holiday tournament type things. And then BU will get either Michigan Tech or Arizona State, and Air Force will get the other. So keep an eye on that matchup. Other games going on that have special significance. Saturday, January 7th, Frozen Fenway. Boston College will play UMass outdoors at Fenway. So keep an eye on that one that Saturday.
Essentially part of the Winter Classic festivities. Yeah.
Yeah, basically a week later. So kind of cool there. Big Ten action here. Let's get to some conference matchups again. Michigan State travels to Ohio State next weekend. Notre Dame gets Wisconsin, and the U.S. under-18 team has a Friday exhibition matchup against Michigan. So keep an eye on that one. CCHA 2.0, Lake Superior has Bowling Green, and Mankato has Northern Michigan. Those are our only matchups of conference note and team note in general for them. ECAC, Dartmouth plays Quinnipiac, and you go, why the heck did you just put Dartmouth against a team that, is a top 10 team in the country? Because Dartmouth is a bottom 5 team in the country, and they've given a bunch of these teams scares. So they've been trending in the right direction. So keep an eye on that one. That could be a big one for Quinnipiac and their season moving forward. Hockey East, 3 matchups here. New Hampshire travels to Providence. Merrimack has Yale. So keep an eye on that one with this Merrimack club, who is kind of
flipping a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit mountain and valley, kind of similar to what UConn did a couple weeks before the break. UMass Lowell has AIC on Saturday. That's a non-conference action matchup. See if UMass Lowell can redeem themselves. Atlantic Hockey, Army plays Sacred Heart, the only conference matchup on Thursday. And then Alaska Anchors travels to Maine, so they are staying out east in that non-conference schedule. See if they can string together their first 3-game winning streak of the season. That would be interesting for them. So, a lot of college hockey scores that still have more intrigue. Moving over to the NCHC and the pairwise and talking about that recap. What happened for NCHC teams? More hockey here. Colorado College hosted Princeton, and it was a 7-2 victory for the Tigers in night number 1. They continue their Friday ways of success. And then Princeton, a 2-1 overtime finish for them last night. So again, a pretty good little matchup like we talked about that Tigers team. Well, wow.
Yeah, about that. Which Tiger, though?
the Princeton Tiger team, you can never... Well, actually, you know what? Both of them. You can never really count the Tigers out. I think that's fair to say. And this CC team, still interesting. I believe this was a meaningful game, so I believe this is going to count for them, which CC has gotten no help in the pairwise. But nonetheless, I suppose maybe
31 though, so that's something.
Yeah, I suppose they've gotten a little bit of help from St. Lawrence, who did play Omaha. They earned the split. St. Lawrence, a 2-1 overtime finish in night number 1, and then UNO, a 5-2 victory in the second night. Niagara, a split against Miami, 5-3. The Redhawks win in night number 1, and then Niagara, 5-4, a victory. What a great series that was if you went to go and check out a couple of those hockey games. And then Duluth hosted St. Thomas on Saturday only, 2-1 victory for them. And then, of course, our St. Cloud State Huskies, their exhibition game, which really doesn't show up on any schedule. So we have the box score nonetheless, 5-2 victory for the Huskies in this one. Everything we kind of anticipated. The only thing I think that really surprised me was the fact that we didn't see any of James Gray at all in this hockey game, but maybe it was a bit too tight to...
Did you actually? So our friend from KBSC, Alexander Fern, actually mentioned that if he were to have dressed, he would actually have lost his red shirt and would have lost eligibility. So there was an implication for his NCAA eligibility for that decision. He explained it actually very well. So I think that being aside, if that wasn't the case, I think we probably would have seen James Gray.
What a weird rule for an exhibition game. Even.
Yeah. I guess since he technically dressed, even though it doesn't count, I guess if he puts on the sweater, I guess they count that. So either way, there was more, shall we say, HR. Let's throw it to HR.
Here's the thing. Does that say something about him, though, knowing that the Huskies don't want to burn a year of his eligibility? Maybe they're that high on him that they say, we anticipate him being a guy that's going to continue to develop throughout his career here.
I think it's twofold. I think it does say that, and we've heard it right from Brett Larson, too, that he's not far away. I mean, he's technically the third, but in reality, he's like a 2-1 or like a 1-3, right? He's a 1.3. And it more so, let's think about this. Dominic Basie is a junior, right? He will be a senior. Jackson Castor is a senior. Now, mind you, he does have the ability to elect a fifth year because of COVID.
Yeah, I believe he's part of the last group. I think this is the last wave that can do that. So
Basie would be too, wouldn't he? Because he was there. Basie would,
yeah,
yes.
I suppose maybe it's the next group.
Yeah, it'll be after Basie. So now, mind you, Basie is a Chicago draft pick. So he has that ability to sign Jackson Castor. You just don't know, right? So I think having that year of when you're trying to maybe go out and get another goaltender, mind you, Isaac Posh, who was in the NAHL with the Minnesota Wilderness, if I recall, right? Still, kind of figure out where his development is. So I think it's definitely to save face for the goaltending position regardless, but I know they're very high in James Gray in terms of his talent.
Yeah, thank you to Alex Fern for that one. Of course, we also, had the matchup for the Gophers coming up listed as Friday, Saturday too. And, like I said, we try to be as accurate as possible, but to be fair to us a little bit, we're covering 62 men's hockey teams, 8 WCHA teams, 32 NHL teams, and also covering the 6 teams in the Central Division, 2 of which that we work for in the Null. So
yeah.
Hockey sometimes runs together and it's easy to miss.
Can you put that in a list? I mean,
yes, I mean, it's just,
hell.
Yeah. Oh, and there's this thing called the World Juniors going on as well, too. Why don't we? And of course, we didn't even get to the women's world, the Five Nations Cup or whatever it was too.
Right.
And there was some
Spangler
Huskies
Cup too.
Yeah, the Huskies had some really good showings on the women's side of that too. So we want to try to circle back to that at some point. I think we will too. So we promise we're doing our best. We're trying to get there. But nonetheless, the Huskies did get there in their exhibition matchup. Kind of everything that we anticipated in this one. Adam Ingram opened the scoring a minute and 17 seconds in. A nice little wrist shot unassisted for him. And then a power play goal, Zach Okabe in the second period, 6.5 minutes into the middle frame from Mason Sahlquist, Yami Krannila. And then a shorty 3 minutes later, Micah Miller, no surprise there with his foot speed from Krannila and Dylan Anhorn. Manitoba would get one back on the man advantage. Mike King from Lyndon Chorister and Parker Malchuk. And then the Huskies responded with their power play goal of their own. Good to see the special teams click along just fine there. Grant Cruikshank just 2 minutes later from Kyler Kupka and Vieti Mietnin. And then with seconds to play in period number 2, Ryan Gottfried from Devin Skoleski and Brett Davis coming in for the University of Manitoba. In fact, I should look at that roster. I did have a teammate by the name of Brett Davis, so that's interesting. But nonetheless, Mason Sahlquist, an empty netter, with a minute and 1 second to play from Aiden Spellacy to cap off that hockey game. Manitoba was 1 for 6 in the man advantage. Huskies 2 for 4 in their power play summary. I know there was some talk about Jack Rogers, I believe, had 3 infractions.
I think so, yeah.
In that hockey game too, and talking about, it's a good way to end up on the bench and that sort of thing. I mean,
no,
some nights just end up that way.
And he's a freshman, right? And part of Brett Larson's philosophy and our countless conversation with him is sometimes you have to let the rookies play through mistakes, right? And so, it's going to be one of those where you're not going to rip the kid, right? But you are going to go back on film. And sometimes, like stick infractions, right? Where maybe you poke a high stick and maybe you
had a slashing.
Yep, exactly.
Infraction.
So maybe it's, a discussion about body positioning. Maybe it's a conversation about maybe the angle you take in, as far as trying to, put pressure or force the play up the wall.
And if you're a freshman, right, and you have a freshman player, I guess, coming in, would you rather have him being a little overzealous and a little overaggressive and having to kind of figure out how to tame that,
yes,
ability
100%.
versus someone who's too timid to go into the corners? I think that's something to be said.
Well, and we have seen that play out with Vieti Mietnin, right? Where
exactly what I was thinking of.
great, freshman campaign, but the big knock on him his sophomore year was he wouldn't engage in the board battles, and if you just got it into his kitchen, essentially, he was not the same player, and he wasn't, right? I still feel like there's still growth to Vieti Mietnin, but you're absolutely right. You want a freshman to come in, not be afraid to get their nose dirty a bit, and if you take a couple infractions, granted, the game's faster, the game's players are bigger, stronger. You're going to have those things happen, but they become teaching moments, right? And that's the point of this where Brett Larson is. It's not like you've earned a spot on the bench. It's like, hey, we see your abilities, but now let's review the tape to see how we can maybe avoid those. And again, a lot of it is small things, right? No, it's not you're playing the game the wrong way. It could be just, the right set of circumstances at the wrong time kind of thing.
Certainly would agree. 56.3% the Huskies were in the faceoff dot, 36 for 64. Shots 39-16 St. Cloud. So the Huskies controlled pretty much large portions, if not all, of this hockey game. It was really even penalties withstanding. I thought the Huskies were just fine. Jackson Castor stopping 5 of 6 for an 8.33, and then 9 of 10 stopped by Dominic Bassi, a 900 save percentage. Quite obviously, Ross Hauerluck, the former Western Michigan University Bronco, stopping 29 of 33 for an 8.78. No fault of his own. I thought he played very well and has played very well for that Manitoba Bison Club all season. And then Harkness on the other side as well, stopping 5 of 5 for a perfect save percentage in that one. NCHC standings, of course, have not changed because nobody played conference games. Denver is sitting atop with 23 points. St. Cloud has 20, CC at 17, Omaha at 15, Western and Duluth tied at 13 respectively in that order. North Dakota in 7th place at 12 points, and then 7 points for last place Miami, as we heat up for what should be an interesting ride in about a week and a half to really reset with some conference action here after we get out of the holiday break. So it's going to be exciting here. What is on tap for our NCHC teams? Alaska Fairbanks will travel to Denver. Curious to see what that Nanooks team can do. They gave Denver fits, I believe, last year. I think there was a 4-4 tie last year that the Pioneers kind of had a bit of a scare. Bemidji State travels to Duluth. Huskies fans keeping a keen eye on that one. You would like to see the Beavers win that one in any sort of fashion. Colorado College, Western Michigan, Omaha, North Dakota, and Miami are off. And then Minnesota, a home and home, traveling to St. Cloud State. They'll be in St. Cloud at 6 o'clock on Saturday night, the 7th, and then the 8th, 3 o'clock on Sunday at 3M Arena in Mariucci down in the Twin Cities there. So we're going to preview that matchup, obviously, but let's start with something first, Nick, that we read. After, I believe it was a 2-year agreement, and then you had the extra year on top of that. St. Cloud's scheduling agreement is done with the Minnesota Golden Gophers and talking about their schedule. And I think that a lot of Husky fans, are pulling the Bob Motzko card here. And they're like, of course,
that's the easier.
Yeah, of course, typical Bob, he doesn't want this and that. And that might be a part of it. We're not saying it's not. But I want to kind of run through something that you and I talked about pre-show here. Minnesota's non-conference games or exhibition games, whatever mix. Lindenwood to start the season, a 2-game set against Mankato. And then after that, you had Arizona State somewhere in the middle of their schedule for the Big Ten. You have Bemidji State and the U.S. Under-18 team, which just happened this last week, and the 2-game set against St. Cloud State, and that is it. And Nick, my question to you is this. Is this so much... Not to say that we shouldn't rekindle the Midwestern, Minnesota, old WCHA rivalries, but is this more, Bob doesn't want to play St. Cloud State, or Minnesota is just looking to kind of expand their playing field again and see other opponents here for maybe the next couple of years?
So let's look at this from the lens of the Minnesota Golden Gophers, right? I think what Huskies fans cannot deny is the Gopher franchise, right?
Yeah.
They are the big dog without question in the state of Minnesota. They are the perennial college hockey program. They have reascended and retaken that without a question.
Number one in the pairwise, by the way.
Yeah. So they're good. So they've gotten back to, shall we say, national recognition status where people know who they are. They know they're good. That's where this program was supposed to go under Bob Motzko. So let's take that one step further. You're in a Big Ten conference. You're in a conference that's a power conference outside of college hockey, football, basketball. I don't have to go any further than that. Let's just say that Minnesota has their eyes a little bit higher. They're looking at, shall we say, national type, scheduling opportunities, which could, shall we say, maybe make some money off of it.
Yeah.
I truly feel that it's not, and I think you and I agree on this, it's not at all, I don't want to play St. Cloud. That's not it at all. Is there something with Bob? We don't know. I don't think so. I know Bob and Brad are pretty close. I know that if, other things were aside, the interest, especially early in the hockey season, what the last couple of years has generated in terms of Wisconsin being on the schedule for both squads, right? Duluth, North Dakota, Bemidji, right?
And think about them expanding and maybe moving back out east for the first time in a couple of years. Would you watch a Gophers BU old late 70s national championship matchup? Why would you not? And you think about, you get what, 6 to 10 games max in your exhibition non-conference schedule?
Yep. So, and you beat me to the punch, right? And that's kind of what I get from looking at this, right? Is it's not that you're saying done with St. Cloud. It's more of, we see an opportunity to sort of, kind of reestablish some of those old road trips out east. St. Cloud, remember, they used to travel to Alaska and do Fairbanks and Anchorage. And then they would also travel out east. Remember the 18-19 team, the team that never lost at home. They traveled out east and also out west. That same season for part of their non-conference schedule. You kind of wonder if, and I know we've talked about this before, Noah, but I think the bigger question is, the pandemic brought everybody back to, shall we say, closer matchups, and it reignited a lot of that fan base. And I hope that it's at least part of the mix. I think that's at the end of it, is that I don't think this is a permanent thing. I think that there will be a cycle, but you kind of wonder if the college hockey landscape is looking to kind of expand back out again in terms of traveling. Look at Alaska. They just did it and had a pretty successful weekend. You kind of wonder if that's kind of what they're looking at.
Both schools in Alaska, actually, at least we'll have to see how the Fairbanks handles Notre Dame. But like you mentioned, this Minnesota matchup too, number 1 in the country for the Gophers, number 5 in the pairwise for St. Cloud State. Before we get to the pairwise, Nick, this is a big boy matchup. Regardless, if this is the last year of the agreement for some while besides tournament time, make it count. This is going to be a good one here, and you should be at the Herbrooks National Hockey Center if you haven't gotten tickets, if there's any left. I don't even know if there are.
And it's a home Gophers first. St. Cloud gets the Saturday matchup, if I recall.
Other way around. St. Cloud gets the first matchup, and then it's in Minnesota. I'm almost positive, unless I read it wrong.
Because that was. I thought that was the other way around.
Yes. January 7th, 6 o'clock, like I said, in St. Cloud, and then 3 o'clock, 3M Arena, January 8th on Sunday. So it is flipped. But with that being said, this Gophers team, like you mentioned, they're a good hockey team. And I think there's some jealousy, knowing that, let's be honest, Bob Motzko is a fantastic coach, and he's really rekindled that program again. We talked to him when he joined us way back in one of the early episodes, like episode 19 or something.
Year and a half ago,
about this being a passion project for him, and that was the one place he would go besides St. Cloud. I think Huskies fans are just a little bit bitter by the fact that, he made a career move, and I think that because it's the Gophers, they're all upset. If he goes to Colorado College or if he goes to Alaska Anchorage, no one bats an eye, but it's because it's the Gophers.
Go there, let's be honest.
And that's the thing, like, I think more and more as I see coaches and talk to them at various levels, they're entitled to do a career move that they feel is best for them and their family. There's so much more that goes into it, just saying, oh, you don't want to be part of St. Cloud hockey anymore. How dare you? Excuses be damned sort of thing. And it's like, no, there's so much more to that. But where I was going to is just simply saying this Gophers team is good, and St. Cloud is going to have a very tough test here this weekend.
They are. And, you have to appreciate, just one small note, what Bob Motzko was able to do as a recruiting piece with St. Cloud. Remember when he was on the show, the first, we asked him point blank, and he said, hey, when the Gophers call, you pick up the phone. And he said something to the tune of, things progressed very quickly, which I would imagine they did, because let's just say that they were in hot pursuit, because the Gophers, meaning the athletic program, saw what he was able to accomplish with, shall we say, probably a quarter of the scholarship money that he could get. And that's probably being liberal too. I'm sure it was less than that, right? To get the right players, the right skill players to come in and make that 18-19 run that he did, right? 17-18, I think was the last one, getting my years mixed up. It all flows together at this age. So with that being said, though, when you're able to recruit and offer more scholarships, this is what and granted, this was the same thing with the transition from Wood to Lucia. It was the exact same thing, is that Lucia was able to get the recruits, the high-end recruits into the Gophers. So, but that being aside, the matchup, this is huge, right?
Yeah.
This is a
must-watch hockey.
Must watch. This is a measuring stick, I think, more for St. Cloud than it is for the Gophers. But you talk about intrigue. You talk about what this could mean for both squads, right? I don't see a sweep in this, but I do see hopefully not a jersey tug. We don't want any of that. But at the end of it, this is going to be a battle that's won, especially on the walls. Holy cow. How does St. Cloud handle Logan Cooley and Jimmy Snuggerud on top of Matthew Nyes, right? How do they keep these big guns to the outside in the low danger trenches against also a very good mobile defensive core? And shall we say the goaltending, maybe the biggest question mark in net for the Gophers. But it's also hard to really test them when they're not giving you much room in the offensive zone too. They defend pretty well, especially in their own zone. So it's going to be a matchup.
The only advantage that Minnesota or St. Cloud really kind of has here is the fact that you mentioned Jimmy Snuggerud, of course, Jack Peart for the Huskies there as well too, but a bevy of Gophers, about 3 or 4 in the World Junior Championship. If the U.S. goes deep, I mean, you got to think about the last game would be played on January 5th, and then they would come home and play on the 7th and 8th. So that would leave them a little bit tired with a lot of hockey that they've been playing in the past week. Sure. So that could be an advantage for the Huskies regardless. But it's a big boy matchup. This defensive core for the Gophers, like we said, is probably the deepest that they've had in maybe 2 decades. And they're young too. They're not even a veteran-laden group, which not that Gopher decors generally are, because most guys end up moving on after a couple of years. But nonetheless, it should be very interesting. Minnesota, number 1 in the pairwise. Quinnipiac, Denver, Penn State, St. Cloud round out your top 5. Merrimack only dropping to 6 right now. So that Providence team, like I said, they're at 12. So fairly close matchup for them. BU, Michigan, UConn, Ohio State round out your top 10. Harvard clinging around at 11. Providence at 12, like we said. Michigan State, the Spartans at 13. Western Michigan jumping to 14. UMass in that conversation as well. Cornell, your top 16. Rounding out your top 20. Michigan Tech, Notre Dame, North Dakota, like you mentioned, jumping to 19. That's a big deal for them.
That's a huge deal.
Bemidji State right behind them, and then Fairbanks is right there at 21. So BC, RIT, Mankato, and Omaha round out your top 25 right before Arizona State. Like you said, UMass Lowell is at 27 right now. And this is January 1st at 3:11. So maybe they survived a little bit. Other NCHC teams, Colorado College, like you mentioned, at 31 right now. Duluth at 34. I don't care what Max Veach says. Miami is at 42.
And ahead of Wisconsin now, so there's at least there's that.
I think that's it. Other Minnesota schools, St. Thomas is at 46. So Wisconsin's still at 35, right behind Duluth. Although not that we've kind of given the Badgers a hard time, but they haven't played bad. They just haven't played anybody significant and gotten wins.
Right. Well,
in that respect,
and shall we say that unless Wisconsin surprises in the Big Ten, tournament, which I mean, you can't rule it out. That's the strange thing about this year. It could happen. Probably won't, because I can't imagine them beating the Gophers in round number 1 in the Big Ten conference tournament. If that's how that seeding would go. But either way, I just can't see Wisconsin pulling off a surprise. But you can't never say never.
Yeah, this year has been interesting. Well, let's flip over to a Wisconsin team that we know is good. Over to the WCHA women here, and talking a little bit about what they've got going on here. WCHA roundup, a couple of games to recap here. Ohio State played Saturday, Sunday against Cornell last weekend. It was 4-3 and 4-0 for the Buckeyes, and then they trounced Lindenwood this weekend in Missouri, 9-1 and 6-0. So pretty impressive. Wisconsin, the aforementioned women's team, playing Quinnipiac. It was a 3-0 finish for Wisconsin yesterday. They play again today on Sunday, so we'll have to recap that score for you as well. WCHA standings have not changed. Minnesota's at 41, right ahead of Ohio State with the same point value. Better record for the Gophers, though. Wisconsin in third at 37. The big three staying pat. Minnesota Duluth at 21, St. Cloud right behind at 19 points. Those two doing battle with Minnesota State right there with them at 16 points. And then the two cellar dwellers, St. Thomas jumping to 8 points, Bemidji State at 3 with their sweep against, or losing in a sweep against St. Thomas a couple weeks ago really hurt them. What's on tap for the WCHA? Wisconsin, like we mentioned, that Sunday game for them. And then Duluth will travel to Wisconsin the upcoming weekend. RIT plays St. Thomas. Mankato travels to Lindenwood, doing exactly what Ohio State did last week.
Yep.
Bemidji and Ohio State are both off. And then the Gophers and St. Cloud in the East-West Showcase in Minneapolis, January 6th and 7th. So Friday, Saturday, Minnesota gets Merrimack while St. Cloud gets New Hampshire the first night, and then they flip. So then Minnesota gets New Hampshire and St. Cloud will get Merrimack in night number 2. So this women's team coming off here with this holiday little matchup here down fairly close to home. Don't have the long, lengthy travel that they have had in years past as far as some holiday tournaments here. How do you anticipate this matchup going for the women, and what is important for them?
Well, it's important in a couple different ways, right? Because they're 14th right now in terms of the coaches polling. So first time in how long that they were ranked, like 10 years?
A while,
yes. So, and you want to, keep that flag planted in the sand, right? So, but mind you, these are going to be, tough tests for them. St. Cloud has not been, shall we say, the best road team per se historically, but I think they'll fare okay. I think there'll be closer games. I just wonder. With the time off for the women, how, especially that first game goes, if they can get their feet underneath them, how well their, shall we say, the hockey puck management is, because sometimes that lags a little bit too when you've had some time off, but I expect them to be competitive. I could see them taking both of those games. But, again, good starts is going to be key for Brian Idalski's squad, because when they play and get a rhythm going, they're much better. When they have started slow, they've had a tough time, shall we say, catching up.
Would agree. Yeah, you can't really drop them both. You don't want to have anything like that happen. Want to feel like you're coming out of the holiday break with a little bit of momentum, and then just like the men back in action for some conference play the rest of the way. Very abbreviated coverage of the women. They didn't play, and we're just waiting for the next step, quite obviously. Over to the Minnesota Wild here, our last topic in the main portion of the show. We'll talk a little bit about them, who are 8-2 in their last 10, 21-13-2 on the season, 44 points, a victory last night as well. They sit third in the Central with a plus 14 goal differential. Nick, it's interesting, at the start of November, they were like -3 in goal differential. So they have been playing well as of late. You got to give them credit a little bit. They might not be going away like we thought they were going to a month ago. Past couple of weeks here, Ottawa 4-2 victory, Anaheim 4-1 victory before dropping a 5-2 contest against San Jose, beating Winnipeg 4-1 before losing to the same score against Dallas this past week, and then a 5-2 victory last night against St. Louis. They have Tampa this upcoming Wednesday the 4th. They're in Buffalo on Saturday, and then come back home to play St. Louis on Sunday. Kind of a nasty little road trip there. Yeah. But nonetheless, as we have the standings, of course, pulled up in the western side of things, they are 3 points behind Winnipeg in second, and they are, I'm very bad at math. What is 12 minus 4? 8 points?
Yep.
8 points behind Dallas for that first place spot. As far as the wild card, Colorado is 3 points behind them as far as Central Division teams. And then Edmonton is 2 points behind them for Pacific wild cards. So if Minnesota was in the Pacific, they would actually be 1 point ahead of the third place team in the respective Pacific division. So they've had a nice little resurgence as of late. Seattle, St. Louis, Nashville, Vancouver on the doorstep, so to speak, for the wild card. Everyone else is pretty much out of it. So and saying Vancouver and Nashville are in there is being a bit gratuitous, I think. But nonetheless, this Wild team, we've talked about it. Ryan Reeves has been more than serviceable. Probably could have way more points than he has had. The defensive core has looked good for this group. A couple of key guys returning from injury. Ryan Hartman makes his unit much better his return. This Wild team starting to heat up a little bit, Nick.
And we said it would happen, right? It was one of those where we saw at the early, we saw what the struggle was, and we said they can fix it. They just have to commit to it, and they have, right? And Ayton, you don't win in the NHL by chance, right? I think, do you get games where maybe the bounce goes your way here and there? Sure, but you still have to, create your own luck. And I think that's true, especially in the NHL. The team, even just on the eye test, looks much better. They look more cohesive. They look like they're playing more of that uniform, shall we say, game plan they're executing it. Again, Hartman coming back in the lineup. Matt Boldy, I want to say something about Matt Boldy. He's been inches away in multiple games from getting on the score sheet. He is he's so fun to watch as a young player. He's really good at protecting the puck. He's deceptive. I think he is generating a lot of those scoring chances. Freddie Gaudreau was heating up. It's things are trending in the right direction. We'll put you that way. So at the end of it, this isn't, I don't think I speak for you when I say we weren't surprised by this. It's good that we saw the progression with this, but here's the thing. At 44 points, they are not that far from being, shall we say, teetering
on the other side of that line.
And 41 points for Colorado. Now, mind you, I think this is the big question to you, Noah, and that is Colorado's going to get healthy at some point. And when they do, look out. So these division games and every point's going to matter because you're going to almost have to build a little bit of a buffer for them. I would be shocked if Colorado isn't able to recover. I have no doubts that they will when they get McKinnon back. Is it Rantanen that's been out, or is it Lynn Landeskog?
Well, Landeskog, and then you've got Nichushkin, who we just talked about, of course, has his injury as well, too. You look, of course, injuries of our own. Marcus Foligno was on IR as well, too. And, of course, a couple of call-ups there. Mason Shaw had his 2-game suspension as well, too. You know who has really impressed me? And we talked about this last year and said, he's probably not really going to get a sniff at the show. Well, he did, and that's number 74, Sammy Walker. And he has looked really good. And one of the things that it was interesting, I was talking with my dad about it, and he goes, he's not a big guy, but he said what's been really impressive for him is he's won a lot of board battles, and not because of his physicality, because of his finesse and his craftiness to be able to dig pucks out of situations. He's a guy that might honestly be considered as a much more serious look than I think any of us seeing him coming out of the college hockey world has anticipated. Tim Army in Iowa has done a fantastic job with him.
Signed him to a long-term extension. Seriously, Tim Army. Holy cow.
Sammy Walker has been impressive. Of course, his first NHL goal was an empty netter, but he could have had 5 before that. I mean, he has looked really good. Key guys for the Wild stepping up at key times. The former Golden Gopher, surprising a little bit.
And this is the funny thing about when we go back to September, right? How all the hype was Marco Rossi, making the jump, as well as Kalen Addison. Addison has been up and down, right, in terms of his performance and his play. He's now kind of down that third line role, but he's starting to figure it out a little bit. For Marco Rossi, we know he just never did get sent to Iowa, and you know what? I'll be bold, and I've said this before. I don't think he's coming back. I really don't. I think they're going to keep him down there, and I think it's the right move for him to stay down there. How important, and let me ask you this question, Noah. I'm with you. Sammy Walker has impressed, not only with his speed, but like you said, his finesse and just the way that his hockey IQ, as you can see it. He could be sort of that dark horse depth forward that you could really use in a playoff situation.
You know who he reminds me of? This might be a throwback of a name. Jordan Schrader, of course, also a former Golden Gopher as well, too. Someone who's very fleet of foot, not the biggest guy, but very shifty, very crafty in the way that they play, and brings a little bit of speed and skill to a bottom 6 role. You mentioned Marco Rossi.
One difference. Jordan Schrader was not the type of player, and I covered him for the 4th period. And actually, when he first made his first trip to Vancouver, talked to him as well as former Bulldog. Can't remember his name. Mason Raymond about his game, and basically said, the big thing with him was he didn't really attack directly the players. Schrader was, sort of that player that got him, would purposely get lost and then reappear at the right time. Walker attacks defensemen. He's a little bit different in that regards, but over and all, you're making use of your size in different ways and making it effective in terms of, driving possession, driving offensive chances.
Jordan Schrader sure did love this time of year around the World Juniors, so let's just put it that way. Marco Rossi, by the way, 12 points in 12 games in Iowa, 3 goals, 9 assists, -1 with a power play goal so far this season in the A. So just wanted to throw that out. Had 53 points in 63 games in Iowa last season, so we'll keep an eye on that one. Gustafsson, been very, very good for the Wild here. We talked about
he's
it.
not a starting goaltender.
I know. People keep doubting him, and they, like I said, he's 23, barely almost 24 years old, and it's like you've got to realize goaltenders take time. He only had a cup of coffee with arguably one of the worst teams in Ottawa. I mean, you give him a chance to develop a little bit. I mean, he could be a guy. Let's be real. At some point, Marc-Andre Fleury is going to get old or fall off the table or retire or something. Like, we're getting to that point in the next couple of years. And you talk about Jesper Wallstedt, the goaltender of the future, that sort of thing. Philip Gustafsson might make the case to be a serviceable starter / backup 1A, 1B when that time rolls around. He's definitely looked good as of late.
I think he already has, Noah, and I think that has, if you're talking about a goaltender, and granted, the styles, right, are completely different. We've talked about before how Gustafsson is so calm. He doesn't overplay. Mind you, he's a bigger goaltender, right? So he has the ability, but he moves well. He reads pucks well. If there's maybe one thing I've noticed is maybe sometimes the rebound control, certainly, pucks coming through traffic. But again, he's 23 years old. And again, the run he's been on, we talked about it before the season, is his performance is going to be crucial to allow Marc-Andre Fleury to get the necessary rest again at 37, 38 years old. So that way he can be ready for hopefully a postseason berth. I think we're trending in the right direction that way, both the team-wise as well as how they want to split time. It's going to be more important as we get past, shall we say, the trade deadline into March and April. As far as goaltending goes, I don't think for the Wild, in terms of the brass as well, the fans, you can't ask for a better tandem right now in terms of both of their performances. You can be comfortable with no matter who's between the pipes, and that's saying something. But you can't always say that. A lot of clubs are looking for that 1-2 split. Minnesota's got it right now.
Yeah, 36 games played. In the next 2 weeks, we will hit the halfway point of the regular season in the National Hockey League. Still a lot of pucks to be played there in professional hockey. With that being said, Nick, I think that will do it for the main portion of the show. We've got one more tournament to cover, and it's a big one. The medal round gets ready to get underway for the World Junior Championships up in Canada. And welcome into the Extra Ice session, our final segment of the show. Nick Maxon joining myself, Noah Grant. Of course, a couple of Americans rooting for probably, America in the World Junior Championship. Yeah. Nick, if you were unfamiliar with the World Junior Championship, this was the year to watch. The parity amongst these teams has been mighty, mighty impressive here. I thought that it was just so much fun to watch here. A couple of notables here. Let's start with the other side, Canada. But it has been impressive. Connor Bedard tied the Canadian World Junior record for most points in a single game for Canada, 11-2 rout of Germany. Dave Onderchuk, Brendan Morrow, Mike Camilleri, Gabriel Bork as the only other Canadians. Of course, tied Jordan Eberle with the most all-time career goals by a Canadian after scoring his 13th and 14th. And this was before even the last game. I believe he broke that in very good fashion yesterday. So he's been mighty, mighty productive watching him. As far as results here, of course, the U.S. beating Finland yesterday. They beat Latvia 5-2, lost to Slovakia 6-3, and beat Switzerland 5-1. Canada, their opening night loss to Czechia, stunned a lot of people till you realize how good this Czechia team has been this year. 11-2 victory against Germany, 11-0 against Austria, and then beating Sweden last night. Left us with the standings here, essentially. Is that we had, as of course my webpage decides to zoom in very vehemently, really the only, of course, Austria didn't win a game in Group A, and then Latvia only got 1 point in Group B. I would say out of all of these groups, that these teams that have made the medal round, the only team that maybe doesn't have a whole lot of business being there is maybe Germany.
Maybe.
But other than that, everybody else has earned their spot and then some. I really like the standings. The 3-point system, I think, works really, really well, just as we've talked about for the NHL. I think it's a much better setup. But what do we have on tap here? Well, we do have our quarterfinals. The U.S. will get Germany, so hopefully the U.S. can make quick work of that. Czechia, who finished first in their respective A pool, they'll get Switzerland. Canada is second in that A pool. They get Slovakia, and Finland gets Sweden in that 2B 3A matchup. That should be interesting. Seedings for the semifinals. Czechia is actually the top team. They will have home ice advantage wherever they go. US is the next team right there in 1B. Canada is next after that. Finland, the 2B team. Sweden, 3A. So the A pool pretty much dominating the top 3 spots before Slovakia in 3B. And then it is the 4B team that is ahead of the 4A team, Switzerland, before Germany. As we get set here, January 2nd through the 5th, these games will be going on here. And Nick, first of all, Jimmy Snuggerud's really good at hockey.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Been very impressive for the U.S. But other than that, first impressions of the World Juniors, a lot of parity here, a lot of intrigue before the end of 2022. What have you liked from the World Juniors? What has been your overall impression? What's your biggest couple of takeaways so far?
So I've said this multiple times. This is my favorite tournament to watch every year. Because not only do you get to see, the team's best talent, but, we talk about growing the game often, Noah, and this is a snapshot of how the game is growing skill-wise around the world. And Darren, we saw that early on when Canada lost their first game, 5-2. So I've actually really liked this tournament. It's been seesaw back and forth. The U.S., I think for me, even though they've struggled at some points, Jack Peter, a really tough game, number 2 in the prelims, by the way, was sent down to a third pairing role and really did a nice job just sort of, simplifying his game and responded well, I should say. Holy cow. First of all, Canada can score. They can score a lot. They're leading the tournament with 29 goals. USA can still show that they're good, but my gosh, Czechia has really impressed. Finland and Sweden. My goodness, Sweden has had some firepower coming in. Finland has been a little bit weaker than I anticipated.
Yeah, they've struggled a bit.
But and Germany too. I thought Germany was kind of trending up again. You talk about guys like Tim Stützle, Leon Draisaitl, guys have come out of that program. They're starting to generate more talent, but there's still the depth is still lagging as far as, top end talent for those. I thought they would show a little bit better. Just haven't had it. Not too surprised with Switzerland and shall we say Latvia, and Austria, I should say.
They'll play each other. They'll play each other on the 2nd and on the 5th for the relegation round. By the way, of course, you want to make sure you're winning that matchup, even if you're not in the medal round, so to speak. But obviously, some big performers here. Connor Bedard, 18 points, a plus 11 rating for him.
Stupid.
Logan Stankoven, Logan Cooley, of course, 7 points for him, as well. Dylan Gunther, of course, a lot of Canadians in here. Ludwig Jansen, the defenseman for Sweden. How about him? 6 points in 4 games, 3 goals, 3 assists. Yeah, certainly impressive. David Spacek, of course, one of the higher
Wild pick.
Yeah, well, is he?
He is. He's a Minnesota Wild pick.
Who am I? Oh, I'm thinking of the other Czech who was a high draft pick. How do you say his name? I can't think of it now. It's going to drive me nuts unless I look at the starts with a J. Oh my gosh, NHL draft. He was like a top 5 pick. This is going to drive me nuts. Maybe I'm thinking of Simon Nemec. Maybe is who I'm thinking of.
Maybe.
But nonetheless, David, you're a Czech. That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah. The 6th overall pick for Columbus. I'm not very good with my letters apparently, but other than that, you look at the stats for, a lot of these teams. This Canadian team, really, besides the first game, hasn't been tested a ton.
No.
So I'm a little bit curious as far as how things go, but nonetheless. Obviously, Canada 29 goals for, pacing the tournament. Czechia right behind with 24. The U.S. 19 goals for them. They sit 3rd in that respect. Slovakia doing a very good job at limiting opportunities against for them on those sorts of things in terms of scoring efficiency as well too. So you look at these matchups, Nick, for the medal round. We can talk stats all day. We can talk players that have stood out, and certainly we'll probably recap that at the end. But let's go through these matchups here, Nick. Don't forget they get reseeded each time for the semis based on their ranking here. U.S. takes on Germany. Who do you think comes out of that one?
U.S. for sure.
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope
that
so.
That would be, you talk about bad, because they've had some bad losses in recent years.
Yeah, Czechia last year, but this would be a monumental collapse.
This would be a really bad.
Yeah, like I said, the U.S. probably got the best draw. This is probably the one team that has not a whole lot of business being in the medal round. But nonetheless, they are there. Switzerland gets Czechia. How do you think that one ends up?
Czechia, for sure.
Yeah, they're a well-oiled machine. They're a potential favorite at the World Junior Championship, and to see them and Slovakia and these other teams that historically have trended up and down really be consistent and make things interesting, it's been extremely exciting. Speaking of the Slovaks, they get Canada. Yeah. I don't know.
Oh boy. One thing I was going to mention about the Slovaks, their goaltender, holy cow. Has he been pretty darn good, especially in the preliminary rounds. I think he's had a couple of highlight reel saves. There's a potential for them to steal that game.
Yeah, you're talking about Adam Gajan.
Yep.
Yeah, of course, coming in here has played just under 185 minutes. He's been mighty impressive. Only allowed 6 goals on 99 shots over that span. In fact, I wonder if it... there it is, a 195 goals against average and a 939, basically a 94 save percentage.
She's been good. And we'll just say that, it'll come down to him. Let's see, Canada's, we know their firepower. If he can put on a Job Gibson like performance in the World Juniors, right, and kind of stifle some of those Canadian players. And mind you, the Czech defense I think it's so underrated. I think they have, and the stats prove it, but they're going to have their hands full against Canada. I would love, this is actually a more intriguing matchup than people think. I still think Canada, bests them because I think eventually they'll just get worn down. They're going to spend a lot of time defending, but if it's a team that's comfortable with that, the Czechs are. That's the one thing.
I think the Slovaks win this one.
Oh,
I do. That might be a very bold prediction that might come back to bite me in the ass. But I say that because this team has trended in the right direction. I don't think their record necessarily reflects how good they've been. Obviously, they got the U.S. in that 6-3 loss that the U.S. had. But I think they're a team that limits chances a lot better than people anticipate. If they can slow down the top guns for Canada, the net minding has not been strong for this Canadian group. They haven't been tested heavily. I think if you can start to get a little bit of pushback and maybe survive a period or two, I think this Slovak team has a serious chance of beating Canada. The last one here, Sweden, Finland. I think the Swedes take this one. The Finns have struggled, but Sweden is technically the 3 team comparatively. These are the 4 and 5 spots right in the middle of our brackets here. This one is kind of all hands on deck. All bets are off.
Yeah.
I mean, is there any team that you like?
Not really, because one's been what we kind of expected. There has not, but they haven't been necessarily what's the word? They haven't necessarily been like decisive in their play, right?
Yeah.
So this one's wide open. I don't know how to read this matchup at all.
Yeah, I'm not particularly sure either, but we'll be here to cover it. Of course, the medal round running the 2nd through the 5th of January should be extremely exciting. Other things going on, men's hockey, 6 o'clock Saturday night, Herb Brooks National Hockey Center against the Golden Gophers. Sunday, 3 o'clock Central Time, 3M Arena at Mariucci. Women's hockey getting the matchup here. They will start their first game, of course, down in Minneapolis, Minnesota. They will be playing New Hampshire first, and then it's Merrimack for night number 2. I don't have the times listed. I don't have them pulled up, but that's who they will be playing. I'm assuming it will be maybe later night, at least for the first night, and maybe mid to late afternoon on the second night. And then Minnesota Wild, they play Tampa Bay at home on Wednesday, in Buffalo on Saturday, come back home on Sunday to face St. Louis before we reset for the next week. Happy New Year. Happy 2023. We can't wait to cover the second half of all things college, NHL, World Juniors, and more. It should be exciting. For Nick Maxton, I'm Noah Grant, and we will see you soon in the Den.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Perix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it. He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real. Welcome to the NHL. A game winner.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.